Good morning, everyone. My name is Benjamin O'Connor, and I'm a director at New London Architecture. For those of you that don't know, NLA is London's leading independent centre for the built environment, bringing together built environment professionals, politicians, and members of the public to learn about, debate, and ultimately have a voice on the future shape of London. I'm delighted to welcome you to this NLA webinar this morning in association with the City of London Corporation to hear all about the City of London's recovery strategy that was set out in the Square Mile Future City report launched earlier this year. As we all know, we are emerging from an unprecedented crisis due to the pandemic, which has transformed our lives, work patterns, and certainly our relationship with the office, cities, streets, and town centres. But with an encouraging vaccination programme well underway, we will hopefully see the continual relaxation of the COVID restrictions. Today, we'll be learning about how the City of London plans to address the challenges in this new phase and what will be the new priorities and focus to support the city's recovery, making it an even stronger and more vibrant place to be. This event is part of the NLA year-round City of London programme, developed in association with the City Corporation and supported by View City. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that there'll be a chance to ask our speakers some questions at the end, so please do post your questions throughout using the Zoom Q&A button. I'm now delighted to invite our keynote speaker to present, and that is Catherine Mcginnis, Chair of the Policy and Resources Committee of the City of London Corporation, and she'll be telling us about the city strategy. Over to you, Catherine.
Great, well, thank you very much, Ben, and good morning, everybody. So, as you've heard, I'm Catherine Mcginnis. I'm the Policy Chair at the City of London Corporation, the governing body for the Square Mile. That means I am the equivalent of a borough leader if we were in one of the other London areas. And we're really delighted to be partnering with NLA on today's webinar, focusing on our vision for the city in 2025. Since we were first plunged into lockdown more than a year ago, obviously our personal lives and professional lives have undergone radical changes, and we've seen a change and a rate of change which I think is arguably unprecedented. We've not only had to change the way we do things, but we've seen a huge increase in our use of tech. We've seen the way that the law operates change so that more things can happen. And I'm a lawyer, that's why I take particular interest in that. But we've just seen a massive change and a massive rate of change. And like many of the turning points in the city's history, the pandemic will undoubtedly leave its mark on the Square Mile, shaping it for future generations. This has come at a time when people were already questioning how the city was going to be impacted by the UK's new place in the world. Was Brexit going to have a dramatic effect on what happened in the Square Mile or beyond? And the change in the way that people have been working has also, as Ben has just said, led people to question the future of the office. The future of the office? Actually, the future of the commute. Are people really going to want to carry on commuting into their workspace on a regular basis, as so many have done before? And therefore, again, to question the future of the city itself. But we are very, very confident about the future of our Square Mile. Very confident, and we have reason to be, because be it the advent of the insurance industry after the Great Fire, or the rise of the city's office blocks after World War II, or indeed the way that it changed in the business that was done after Big Bang of the 80s, the city has repeatedly shown its ability to adapt, survive, and thrive. Its story is absolutely one of reinvention, and the recovery is the next chapter in this long history. But we don't underestimate the scale of the challenge. Actually, I would say, I heard someone the other day say that the city has, London has had 30 years, really, of a golden era in which we haven't had to question London as a great global city, and London as a place which unarguably is where people want to come, people want to base their businesses, and people want to be. For all its other challenges, and we all know that London has its poverty and disadvantage issues as well, in a big scale. But we haven't had to prove our case as the great global city. Now we do. And I'm absolutely positive that we can. So what I'm going to talk to you about is how we're planning to adapt to the new normal, and what we're doing to emerge more strongly from this period. Because we're absolutely clear from all the research that we do that London not only remains a world-leading financial centre, but it will continue to be there. Our benchmarking research indicates that when compared with the other international financial centres, London and the UK actually, has the strongest overall competitive offer. And it's perhaps unsurprising, therefore, that we've continued to see very strong interest from investors and developers. In the first 2 months of 2021, for example, so the first 2 months of this year, we granted planning consent to applications equivalent to almost 80% of the total office floor space approved for the whole of last year. And last year, although the pandemic had some effect, last year was quite busy too. So 80% of the total office floor space granted consent in the first 2 months alone of this year. And we know from our conversations with businesses that they remain committed to central London, recognising the continued importance of the office and the importance of bringing people together for innovating, for collaborating, and for building organisational culture. So as lockdown measures have been eased, it's been great to see the energy and the buzz beginning to return to the city. And over the coming months, and in line with the government roadmap, we're going to be urging workers, residents and visitors to show their support for city businesses. We're going to be encouraging them to come back and to show their support through a series of reopening events that we'll be having. We'll also be launching a London recovery campaign aimed at workers and highlighting the Square Mile's diverse and exciting offer and really encouraging the safe return to the office. We need to show people why you shouldn't just be sitting at home doing your work at your desk, as I'm now doing. You come into the centre, come into the office, and not only get the business done, meet your colleagues, collaborate, gossip, whatever else, but go out into our spaces and really enjoy what's going on there, or really just enjoy the environment, actually. Which may sound a funny thing to say with all the buildings and so on that we have, but we have some great open spaces too, as Ben is rather well showing, I think, in his backdrop of St. Paul's with the beautiful blossom outside that. However, the workplace that people will be returning to will, we think, be rather different, and indeed the way that they use it will be rather different. The pandemic has accelerated many social and economic trends, changing the demands that people will be placing on urban centres. And to remain the world leader that we are today, we too need to change. So in the city, our focus has been at looking at how, using our existing fundamental strengths, we can work to enhance the city's global competitiveness and attractiveness, ensuring that we continue to meet the needs of our diverse communities. We really want the pandemic's legacy to be one of reinforcing our existing strengths, but also reimagining the city, reimagining the Square Mile for the new normal, so that we really can come out better than ever and provide the city where people want to be tomorrow. So it's for that reason that we set up the city's recovery task force last year as custodians of the Square Mile, looking at what we need to do. And it was a joint venture between policy, my role with our policy committee setting our strategy and direction, and also our planning and transportation committee looking at the buildings and space. And our ambitious mission is to ensure that the Square Mile is the world's most innovative, inclusive and sustainable business ecosystem, and an attractive place to invest, work, live and visit. Over the past 6 months, we've spoken to more than 250 of our big businesses. We've spoken to partners and stakeholders from across the city, and we've tried to understand how the pandemic has affected their ways of working and their needs going forward. And we've also analysed the roughly 4,600 responses to our online survey. And using that intelligence, we've identified our priority activities amongst our wide-ranging work for achieving that vision of the city that I just set out. And in the report, which we published just last month, The Square Mile, Future City, we've outlined a 5-year action plan of high-impact activities for ensuring that we remain internationally competitive and locally vibrant. And as you'll hear very shortly from Giles, these cover 3 key dimensions. First, we will seek to foster an innovative ecosystem for businesses and for talent. And when I say talent, one thing that came across from all the businesses that we spoke to was the importance of people. for all the rest that the city has to offer, the agglomeration effect of having so many different parts of the sector in one place, it's the access to people and the fact that they can recruit the best people for their business that is perhaps the most important factor for them. So our first priority is fostering that innovative ecosystem for business, but also for talent. Secondly, delivering outstanding environments that support people and businesses with sustainable buildings, high quality streets, and great public spaces. And a key part of that is going to be growing high quality office floor space in the city and responding to changing ways of working by encouraging even more sustainable, flexible, and adaptable buildings. And there's one thing that I need to say here very clearly, and that is that contrary to recent reporting that you may have seen, we will be continuing to protect existing office floor space against other use, including housing, where the loss of office space would cause harm to the primary business function of the city. We greatly value our mixed community, we greatly value our residents, the small, although they are proportionately small in number, but we are a business city, and that is basically what we will remain. But our third priority is ensuring a vibrant offer that engages workers, visitors, learners and residents. So we'll be looking at what we can do to make sure that our retail offer is back up and running and exciting and attractive. We'll be looking at our hospitality, and we already are seeing how people are drawn back to that. And our culture, where we not only have great cultural institutions and activities, but we have a wonderful history too, which we're very comfortable with and want to make most of. I was interested in the conversations that we had. How many of the younger people I was speaking to said that the great attraction of the city was the fact that you had the cutting edge, but you also had the history and the legacy that you could discover at the same time. So, with light firmly at the end of the COVID tunnel, thank goodness, now absolutely is the time for us to take action and to shape a strong and successful future for the city, a future which has innovation, inclusivity and sustainability at its core. And in putting this plan into action, we're going to continue to work very closely with all of our communities and stakeholders. And I have to say, work very closely with the rest of London and the UK. This is a plan not just for us, but this is for us as we connect with London and also partners beyond. So unless Ben wants to come in, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Giles French to take you through the recommendations in depth.
And two things. First of all, very sorry, I've got a bit of a shaky connection, but thank you very much for that, Catherine. And just so everyone knows, Catherine will be around for our Q&A session later. So if you've got any questions for Catherine, now is your opportunity to post them in the Q&A and we'll come to those. So now we're going to hear from Giles. As Catherine said, he's the External Affairs Director in the Innovation and Growth team at the City. He'll be presenting the report. Giles, over to you.
Well, thanks, Ben, and thanks to the team at the NLA for inviting us to present this morning. So I'm delighted to take you through the project which we've been working on in recent months, which Catherine initiated back in November. And the starting point for the Recovery Task Force was this. It's sort of in the wake of the pandemic, cities across the world would face a critical challenge. But our conviction was that those cities that were agile enough to adapt to this new environment and help shape it will continue to thrive. So we believe that the City Corporation has a strong role to play in supporting the long-term recovery of the square mile, and with it, not just the recovery of the square mile, but on London as a whole and the rest of the country. But we can only do that if we work closely in partnership. And that's going to be with business, it's going to be with cultural institutions, and it's going to be with local and national government too. But it's also going to involve working closely with those who work in the city, residents and visitors. And we need to focus on what's going to have the most impact. So, to start with, the overall plan, as Catherine explained, looked at three key dimensions: the world-class business ecosystem, the vibrant offer, and outstanding environments. But to supplement that, we also looked at a series of what we called 6 big moves. And all of those big moves will be delivered through a programme of actions which are detailed in the report. So I'm going to just take you on a very quick canter through those big moves and the actions which accompany them. And then hopefully that will set up some good questions for the panel discussion later. So the first one is world-class business ecosystem. And the first of those big moves is to enable high potential businesses to start, adapt and grow. So the city is well known as being a great location for big firms, but we want to reinforce the square mile's welcome to smaller, high potential firms. We want them to work closely, we will work closely with private sector partners, and we want to help deliver those things which those sorts of businesses need. And that's workspace, it's advice, it's digital skills, and it's access to networks and capital. Indeed, we've actually recently refocused our small business research and enterprise centre in the City of London to provide essential business data and tailored support for SMEs in the square mile. In addition to that, Catherine and colleagues launched a COVID business recovery fund a couple of months ago, worth up to £50 million to provide grants to those businesses which are most at risk at present because of the pandemic, but support that vibrancy and provide key services to workers and visitors in the square mile. We've also begun surveying the top 200 employers in the city to try and understand what their return to the office plans are, how they think their future operating models will look, and to try and have a better sense of what the summer and autumn return of workers will look like, so we can help inform small businesses so they can plan and prepare accordingly. Sorry, there we go. So the second of the big moves is to open London's opportunities to everyone. As Catherine said, the one thing which came up in every conversation with the 250 firms we spoke to was about talent, was about people. It's a huge ingredient of what brings firms to London, and it's also crucially what keeps them here. So we'll be focusing on both ends of that process. One is we have to have a visa regime which continues to enable the hugely talented and skilled workers that we need to come to the UK. But just as crucially is ensuring we nurture the environment for domestic talent, wherever it comes from. So for an example, an initiative we'll be working on over the next couple of years is the task force that we've set up with the backing of government to encourage the socioeconomic diversity within financial and professional services firms, particularly ensuring progression into senior roles. The third area is curate thriving innovation ecosystems. So we've already seen huge strengths in sustainable finance, fintech and the creative industries. And this year, because of COP26, we're working with Mark Carney and the government and his team to mobilise a strong financial services presence at Glasgow. But data is only becoming even more important. And that will be a crucial part of the transition, and we'll be exploring opportunities for the square mile to be a global testbed for data-driven technologies. And one example of where we're doing this already is we're working with the Financial Conduct Authority on a digital sandbox, which enables new businesses and new technologies to take shape. Moving on to the vibrant offer. So this is just as important as the competitiveness, and we want to create and sustain a vibrant and engaging offer in the city. In other words, we want the city to be a great place for workers, visitors and residents. As one of the firms we spoke to said to us, we can create a great office environment, but we need to work together to create a dynamic environment in the city. So building a thriving and inclusive vibrant offer and creating a leisure and destination brand for the city has never been more important. And we think we've got a good story to tell, you know, from hidden history to world-class dining, from fitness classes to art installations, nighttime economy and to experiential theatre, the grand architecture to pop-up shops, major cultural institutions such as the Barbican, Museum of London and St Paul's, to rooftop bars. The Square Mile has got a great leisure and cultural experience, which we think is highly compelling. And we're going to be celebrating what the Square Mile has to offer to workers, residents and visitors through a campaign over the summer. And we hope that you'll all be able to come and enjoy the city as well. Many of the businesses which make up the Square Mile, which make it such a special place, are those small independent retail and hospitality businesses. And we all know they're the ones which have been particularly struggling in the last year. And that's why we set up the COVID Recovery Fund to try and help them to make sure that they're there when more people return to the city when it's safe to do so. Finally, just moving on to outstanding environments. And so the fifth big move is shaping the future city. Now, we know this Square Mile is an attractive location for business, and the pandemic hasn't changed that. But as you can see on this visual on screen, this is kind of the future skyline of the northeast cluster of the Square Mile. And all the buildings you can see there are either under construction or have consent to be built. And as Catherine mentioned, we've already had a really strong series of applications for development in the city this calendar year. And we think that demonstrates that the confidence of the investment and developer community in the Square Mile as a location for the long term. However, we want that city to be a sustainable city. We've already announced last year very ambitious climate action strategy. We want the Square Mile to be net zero by 2040 because we think that the city needs to be the world's most sustainable financial centre, and we can only do that. So we can only help the rest of the world achieve their sustainability objectives if we also lead by example. We also need to be connected. And that means we're going to make sure the Square Mile's communications, energy and transport infrastructure are the best in class. We're aiming for citywide coverage of 5G by the end of 2022, and the pilot phase is about to start. We're also building more electric charging infrastructure to support the transition. And we'll be using anonymised data collection to improve our planning and policy development. And we also need the environment to be efficient and sustainable. It's got to be an attractive place to spend time to support that vibrant offer I was talking about, because if workers want to be there, the firms will want to be there. And so the sixth big move is around world-class streets and public spaces. We will provide new and improved public spaces that are a pleasure to spend time in, and that will include more green space and opportunities for culture and exercise. We're going to accelerate our plans to make our streets more accessible and rebalancing the priority between pedestrian and vehicle and cycling use. So to conclude, the city's offer is for workers, visitors and residents. It's for large and small businesses, and it's with a great offer for culture, arts, heritage, retail and hospitality. And as Catherine said right at the start, the three threads which run all the way through this are the three things we heard time and again from business, which are their priorities, and that's inclusion, innovation, and sustainability. Implementation is going to be key, and that's why we're going to want to work in partnership with business, with cultural institutions, with stakeholders, and with government. So I'm just going to leave you with a very short film, which I hope you enjoy, but which we think sort of captures some of the energy and excitement from what we've heard from those we've spoken to as part of the recovery plans.
People assume many things about the Square Mile, but the young are coming.
There's an incredible togetherness here in Square Mile.
Whatever the technology, we're still human. And the more of us you put in one place, the more ideas you get.
Culture days, town halls, hackathons, escalating, cascading, brainstorming, and parties.
Connection, credibility, trust, talent, and edge.
Contemporary, colourful, challenging, alive.
This is the messy edge of the Square Mile, where so many possibilities live. Come and join us.
I'm here because I believe we can move forward. The winds of change are blowing so hard here at the Barbican.
And the Square Mile is a place where it's profitable to be sustainable.
It's just so inspiring working with passionate people from all over the world.
The Square Mile gives you a powerful platform.
For the young people out there, you're better than my generation. You have a greater sense of social purpose.
Come and challenge the status quo. There are people here who want to open doors for you.
Thanks very much, Charles. I don't know about the audience, but that certainly made me want to get out in the city and just get back to where we were. I know we're going to be in a very different place, but that was a great film to set the scene. So everyone, we are going to go into a panel discussion. Please start getting your questions in. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. So we have Alex Beale joining us, who is Foresight Manager in the strategy team at Landsec and also chair of the CPA Next Gen Committee. We have Charlotte Fletcher, who is a Senior Director at CBRE and Chair of the Cheapside Business Alliance. And we've got Elizabeth Hoyler, who's an Engagement Manager at Oliver Wyman. I'm going to come to each of our panelists to get their response to the city's vision and how they think this could change the way people interact with the City of London. And I'm going to come to Alex first.
Great, thanks, Ben. Morning, everybody. Yeah, great presentations from both Catherine and Giles. So yeah, glad to be a part of the discussion this morning. I think for me, there are a few things that are great as part of this 2025 vision, particularly the fact that the city is focusing on becoming open for everyone. You know, more diversity, more inclusivity, the better. And then overall about the vibrancy of the square mile, like really focusing on the culture element as being a kind of unique draw from the city. It's got so much you know, historic and current culture to celebrate and to share. So I think those two elements being particularly important are great to see as part of this vision. I think the element that actually most resonated for me is about the focus on creating, like, being a place for SMEs and creating this pipeline of growing businesses that want to choose to be in the city, because ultimately, you know, the competition for where businesses start and where they are founded is only hotting up, you know, and not just with places, but also ultimately remotely now as well. But you know, if we can create that the kind of benefits of agglomeration between small and large businesses, then I think you know, creating that pipeline of growth is going to be a huge benefit to the built environment in the city. On top of that, I think you know, COVID has seen an acceleration of many trends. Entry-level jobs facing huge number of challenges. You know, not just from COVID, but automation impacting, you know, training roles. There's more part-time, more contracting, less security, and ultimately a more fluid workforce. And I think that, on top of other things, is creating this kind of gap in the market between education and employment. And I think SMEs play a really interesting role in kind of addressing that. And ultimately, you know, more smaller businesses are just going to feed that pipeline of talent and of bigger successful growth in the future for the city. So I think feeding that ecosystem and attracting those smaller businesses is ultimately where the city can build that pipeline for the future.
Thank you very much, Alex. Interesting you mentioned the SMEs. We've got a question we'll come to later on SMEs, but a number that always sticks in my head from presentations we give around the model here is, you know, over 99% of the city's businesses are SMEs, and over 80% of those are micro businesses with less than 10 employees. And this idea that you think the city is just big buildings full of one occupier is very much gone. So yeah, we'll revisit that. I'm going to come to Charlotte next for her response.
Hi, thanks, Ben. Morning, everyone. Yes, you know, presentations are fantastic, and I love that video. I think it absolutely captures the sort of unique heartbeat of the city within the wider kind of London vibe. I agree completely with Alex. I also think it's really interesting. I've been working with the City of London and the Cheapside Business Alliance in some form for over 10 years. And actually all of these fantastic you know, work streams and thoughts are nothing new. I mean, all of this has been being worked on for years and years. You know, I remember being part of many steering groups about clean air groups and walking tours and maps divided into areas of the city that you could go without roads, you know, without the traffic. as well as inclusive apprenticeships. I was working with the CBA on some when I was looking after One New Change and getting young people into retail. So for me, this is just a culmination and a really great new platform that we have. I think the businesses in the city were always good at communicating and being involved, but obviously the day-to-day business demands meant that sometimes it was a little bit lost in the fog of everything else, whereas now everyone wants to know. They want to know what we're doing, what's happening in the city, and we've got this great new platform to be able to showcase these, these long-standing kind of work streams that are now kind of at the forefront of people's minds. So to me, it's fantastic to see and very exciting.
Great, thanks very much, Charlotte. I come to you now, Elizabeth. Oliver Wyman have been working with the city on the report. What are your response?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I completely echo what both Charlotte and Alex have said, and I guess there are two other things I would highlight that, in my mind, are particularly impactful about what this report is doing and signaling, really. The first is that, as both Giles and Catherine said, this there are a few pages, but it's the function of or the product of a series of extensive consultations with business, right? These actions are created in partnership with business, residents, developers, and other stakeholders in the city. And it's happening in an unprecedented moment, as we all know. So there's something really special about the fact that there's so much momentum building into creating what our future can be. And then I think the second point is the practicality of all of this. As Charlotte said, many of these ideas have been around for a while, and they've been activities that in many ways the city and the Square Mile was already trying to be a leader in. But what's different about this report is it's not so much a report as an action plan, right? We're not talking, we're doing. And underpinning these actions are KPIs, their timelines, their delivery teams ready to bring to put all engines blazing, right, forward and energy. And I think that's really the delivery component, and the fact that this is real is something pretty distinctive about this work.
Great, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I've got loads of my own questions, but we've actually got a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and a couple of them do pick up on the things that I was going to ask anyway. So I'm going to jump straight into the audience questions. So the first one, I think a lot of people are curious about, and I'll just read out the question. It's if flexi work and hybrid working from both the office and from home will become a new trend. It's likely office space will have some reduced demand. Is the City of London's intention to attract more offices to compensate this, or rather facilitate some transition to a more mixed-use City of London, with more residential areas in the Square Mile for a 24/7 active city and a less commute-reliant area? So I don't know if Catherine or Giles might want to pick up on that one.
Well, shall I start and then hand over to Giles? And I'll start with the disclaimer, being a lawyer, which is that I'm not on the planning side. And at the moment, as I said at the beginning, we are seeing demand for office space holding up. I think what's going to be key is responding to the demand and making sure that working with developers and others, we're thinking of the office space that people want for the way they're going to be using it tomorrow. It's really important that we're providing space that's flexible if people are wanting to come in, people are not wanting a sort of permanent base or whatever, or wanting to use it in a different way. So it's going to be a question of meeting the demand. We don't see a big shift towards residential. As I said at the beginning, our residents are important, but this is a business centre and it's going to remain so. But to remain so, it has to move with the businesses and meet the demands that they've got for tomorrow. That does include, as I said, perhaps not being so reliant on commuting, and we're looking at our streets and so on, how we can make it easier for people to get around actively. And as Charlotte said, which I think is a really important point, this is building on work we've been doing for some time. So there's a very strong platform for us. What the pandemic has done, I think, has accelerated some of the things that we were working on, has accelerated it, but we have got this strong platform to move on. Just before I hand over to Giles, I really should have thanked Oliver Wyman for all the work they put into developing this report. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's been really critical. Giles, I'm sure you want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a really interesting question that about does hybrid working mean businesses need less space? And I think, to be honest, from the conversations we've had, businesses don't know yet. And I think actually being candid, the rest of this calendar year is going to be something of an experiment in real time about what does hybrid working mean in practice. I mean, the number of conversations I've had where someone said very confidently, yes, we're going to be doing more hybrid working. And then you would say, so what does that mean in practice? And they go, sort of, and I think we're all in that position. I think so I think it could mean one of two things. Yes, some businesses may look over time to reduce their floor plates, but others are actually thinking more about how they use it differently. And the thing, we talked about how innovation was important. That was, again, time and again, what businesses were saying they put a premium on. They want to bring their staff back together for a number of reasons, training, corporate culture, and so on. But the real benefit is bringing them together to create new ideas, new products, new services for clients. And actually that requires a certain kind of space in which to work. And that may or may not require similar sorts of floor plates. But I think the question also did ask, are we looking to supplement any potential downsizing with attracting other businesses? And I think, say yes. And I think, the city will remain a major financial and professional services centre, and that's absolutely crucial. But there are other businesses, those high potential, particularly technology-driven businesses I talked about in the presentation, and we want them to see the city as part of their ecosystem, whether physically or virtually, or just somewhere where they come to access the networks we can provide. So I'm pretty confident that wherever we come out in the mix, there's demand there for the space. But I think actually we're all going to need to work out exactly how each individual business will operate in future.
Sure, and Elizabeth, you had a response to that too.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to, I suppose, build on what Giles has just said. I mean, when we talk about hybrid working, I think most people can't explain what exactly that means, but I do think it translates to more intentionality with respect to where we work. And so that is to say that when we do come together, and I think there is wide agreement that we need to come together, particularly to innovate and to socialize, where are the places and what are the spaces that we want to do that in? And I think the Square Mile is thinking about that in exactly the right way and has all the strengths to be extremely attractive in an environment where really the bar for coming together is high, right? It means you come together for a purpose, not just because it's the status quo. And I think the city is in a great position there.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. I'm going to move on to a question now. We picked up on public space and green space, which are obviously crucial. And Catherine, you pointed out it's not something that people always associate with the City of London. But my background, I came from the Garden Museum. That was my last role, and I remember coming in and working with open spaces and this idea of 200 pocket parks and these really incredible little green spaces all over the city, as well as obviously some of the bigger spaces. So the question we've got here is, can you give us a sense of the proportion of green space in the future city? The Salters Garden at Barbican is a beautiful example of public space in the city. Will there be more akin to this, especially as the pandemic has highlighted the need for us to engage with nature to maintain our well-being? I don't know if Giles or Catherine, you have any projects you want to highlight or things you want to say on that.
So not specific projects that I can put my finger on, but we absolutely will be exploring every opportunity to create new spaces as part of developments, whether that's accessible roof terraces or whatever, and also as we look at how space is used at a street level. I do think Salters Gardens is a brilliant example. It's absolutely lovely walking through that, and you often see people just enjoying themselves sitting on the grass. This is, I think, one of those areas where we do need to be working in close partnership with developers and thinking what it is that we can do as we go forward.
Okay, thanks. I can think of a couple. I know on Cheapside, Charlotte, there's the Greening Cheapside scheme, which sort of started at St Paul's, which a lot of people won't have seen because it happened during the pandemic, but it's really fantastic. I don't know if you want to say anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, and there are lots of lovely hidden pockets of really beautiful green spaces, and like I said, the City of London, the Cheapside Business Alliance have been working for a number of years to keep those spaces lovely and vibrant and clean and attractive. And I think there are some great projects and plans ahead, some of which will reach fruition, some of which will be a bit too out there. and may take some time to kind of get in place. But it's just the desire and the work that's already gone in to finding and cultivating these areas that I find really fantastic.
Yeah, I've got a couple of favourite green spaces in the city: Christchurch, Greyfriars, and Beach Gardens. I think it's fantastic, the Nigel Dunnett Garden. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, we've got lots of questions coming through here. Which one shall I go for? So I've got one here. Actually, this is from one of my team, but I'm gonna mention it because I think there's a place for it. How do you think online platforms and things like social media, so we obviously look after the One City project, could support the efforts to show off the vibrancy of the city and support hospitality and retail? Do you think there's a place for that? We've obviously been doing a lot of things online in recent times. I don't know, maybe Giles, you want to say about that? Is there anything in your thoughts around the strategy there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, I was just going to add to the previous points. I mean, one of the other things I know our colleagues in our planning team are doing are working, not only will we be reinstating Finsbury Circus, which is obviously a very important green space in the city, but also seeing what we can do to improve some of the churchyards as well, which obviously are a crucial provider of sort of public space in the city. But on digital platforms, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the One City platform is fantastic, and I think none of this is going to be a one hit. We've designed all of this activity, as to be delivered over the next, 5 years, in fact. And a big part of that is going to be about sort of engaging with people, both existing city communities, but also new ones. I mean, that's crucial to us. And sort of reminding people about what it is, that they enjoy when they come in and they see their colleagues. Yes, absolutely, work is crucial, but also so is the socialising. And one of the things that we've been discussing as part of this recovery plan is if people do come in on fewer days of the week, we sort of want to lengthen their time in the city. So if you're going to come in for a couple of days, you're going to try and do all your meetings, well, we also want you to do your socialising in the city as well. And actually, social media is a great way of sort of promoting that idea, reminding people, but also directing them to the opportunities. I mean, I think we would probably all say there's quite a lot of hidden gems in the city, whether it's retail, hospitality, or culture. And, I know, Ben, you and your colleagues do a huge amount of work to remind people of that. But I think it's one of those things we can only ever do more. So I think social media is crucial on that. Yeah. And I don't know if you, Ben, there was a sort of related question about data use, which, if you like, I can try and answer.
Pick up on that, and then I'm going to come to Alex and Charlotte. But yeah, pick up on that, Charles.
Thanks. So yes, just quickly, I mean, probably to be completely candid, we're quite early on in this journey, so I think there's probably quite a way for us to go on the work we need to do. But the idea is that we want the city to be synonymous with best use of data to inform and deliver services, and that's going to involve things like monitoring movement in the city. It's about things like air quality. It's about using smart design, understanding energy use. And I think there's lots of ways we can use data better. We're already doing a lot, but there's a lot more we can do. So I think it's probably fair just to say we're pretty early in that journey, but there's probably a lot more to come over the coming months and years. So, we'll be keen to work with others to deliver that.
Thanks, Giles. Sorry, I didn't have my phone turned off. That's my fault. I'm going to come to you, Alex, next.
Yeah, I think on social media and on kind of how it can play a role in shaping the built environment, I think we're in an interesting era of transparent decisions, but probably eroded trust. And I think developers have a really interesting opportunity to collaborate with numerous other parties. Consumers and workers and end users are choosing who they work for, where they shop, where they go, based on an alignment with their values more and more. And I think developers and companies based in the city have to prove their worth for the community and for the climate ultimately. I think the opportunities of digital, the kind of opportunities to open up collaboration between different partners like authorities, businesses, end users, communities that can ultimately unlock land in better ways, achieve better outcomes, be more representative, integrate communities that are underrepresented in decision making. and ultimately that's the opportunity that social media and kind of digital inclusivity offers. On green spaces, on your previous question, ultimately green spaces all come down to boosting quality of life, and I think there is a role for there's more and more demand for measuring impact of spaces, and people are interested in tracking how their wellness more and more. And I think not only do green spaces have a role to play in that, but the quality of buildings in the city as well. And more and more, I think buildings can help boost people's well-being and quality of life, and green spaces are a big part of that too.
Alex, Charlotte.
Thanks. So my comment was really on the social media issue, and more relating to hospitality and retail, and also something that we haven't quite achieved yet, but as we've been striving for years, is to have that 24/7 environment in the city, and the domestic tourism and weekends in particular, to bring people in. And I think social media is key in people realizing what's there. All the fantastic world-class restaurants and bars, the leisure facilities, the offerings. The city, some areas are still a little bit difficult to navigate if you've never been there before, and some of the best places are hidden away. So I think following people on social media in One City is an excellent platform. I'm still discovering new places through your fantastic posts and photographs. So I think that's an essential tool really to get people to really explore and understand the great things. And it's not scary to go to the city because you don't quite know where you're going. I think that needs to come through.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I think I would just quickly add on to Charlotte's point that, during this work, we talked a lot about, and it has come up in this conversation, right, that we need to partner to deliver the vision that's set out in this report. And I think social media is a fantastic way, in a sense, to get ambassadors for this vision. What better way to show that the Square Mile is vibrant and inclusive and sustainable and green by the businesses promoting their voices and demonstrating that live. And I think that's a fantastic way, and that should absolutely be considered a tool that we use pretty actively going forward to promote this message.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something that came up several years ago in some Smithfield and Edmund research that we actually did early on in the One City project. And it very much speaks to, as Catherine says, the city is a business place. But a lot of the issues around talent, attracting talent, is that use of that word, and we talk about on One City sort of turning people's impression of the city from a business space into an emotional space, and that's a lot of what we're talking about today around creating place. And actually, that it's not just about concrete and glass buildings and offices; it's about everything around that—the public space, the infrastructure, the amazing culture and nightlife, and all the things the city has to offer that often people take for granted. So that seems to be at the heart of the issue. I'm going to pick up on something which we haven't covered yet, really. It's obviously been touched on by Catherine and Giles, which is on domestic international tourism. So we've got a question here: where does domestic and international tourism fit into the city's 2025 vision? The provision of hotels and attractions would be a very important element of a city with a diversified economic foundation. Giles or Catherine, do you want to say something about tourism?
Sorry, Catherine, you go first.
Well, I haven't got a very formed answer. Tourism is really quite important for the city. We've got some great venues and places and history, and indeed, Ben, to speak again about your picture, you're sitting in front of one of them with St Paul's Cathedral, which in normal time would have a lot of visitors. I think there is something around making clear to people how easy it is to access these and actually how to fit things together. Coming across the Millennium Bridge or whatever, there's some great stories and trails that we can encourage people to use. So absolutely, it's already a tourist destination. We've also got actually one of the greatest, most recognised international symbols of London is Tower Bridge in our Square Mile. So we've got some great offerings. People are already valuing them. We'd love to get people back domestically and internationally to come and make more of them. And interesting, even during lockdown, the streets have been pretty full of people taking pictures of themselves in front of some of the iconic sites. It's been rather good to see. Giles, you've got a more technical answer, I'm sure.
I'm not sure I have. I think we all, let's be candid. Tourism is, for London as a whole, it's taken an enormous hit, and will probably continue to do so for most of this year. And we're probably looking at domestic tourism supplementing international. We're working very closely, as a lot of other people are, with London and Partners and the kind of London-wide campaign, encouraging people who both live in London or come to work in London or from other parts of the country to sort of take the opportunity to rediscover and enjoy London in a way that perhaps they haven't historically. As Catherine says, I think we feel we can provide a very important component to that London experience for tourists, and we hope, as do others, it looks like probably 2022 is more likely as a timeline for international tourists to return in numbers. But we think that there's plenty of people across the UK who could come to the city and really find something special.
Thanks, Giles. I'm going to pick up on a question now that you've covered already, but I wanted to drill down a little. And actually, the three words that are in the book are inclusion, innovation, and sustainability, which I think we would agree at NLA, and many would agree, certainly over the last year, have really come to the fore. And the question here is, with the government COVID-19 plan covered in the procurement notice, what strategies are being considered to review and rebalance the city communities with an emphasis on equity in the environment, both socially and in design? There are kind of two questions there, and I would link that actually to a question I had, which is how we can kind of use the energy of the recovery to achieve sustainability and net zero targets and goals. So there's sort of the equity in the environment, and then there's the social side. I don't know, maybe if we start with you, Giles, and perhaps if any of the other panelists have thoughts.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'll sort of hold my hands up at the start and say I'm not an expert on the particular piece of legislation that's been referred to, but I think the point that's being made is about, you forgive the glib expression, but it's the Build Back Better agenda. And I think what has been really interesting is that time and again, businesses we've spoken to throughout this process have unprompted talked about how can they help, whether it's by being more sustainable, whether it's about helping smaller businesses, how we can spread access and opportunity to new communities. And frankly that's something which I didn't hear to the same extent 10 years ago when we had the financial crisis. So I think there is a huge groundswell of ambition to address a lot of these needs. I mean, one small example is, we've commissioned a charity that we helped establish about 20 years ago, which some of you will know, called Heart of the City. Now, we've commissioned them to work with SMEs in the city to help them on the journey towards net zero. And we're doing that for two reasons. One, because we need small businesses to play their part to achieve our ambitions on net zero in the square mile. But also there's quite a tough commercial imperative for that, because larger businesses are increasingly expecting their supply chain to meet certain socially responsible objectives. So actually, if you can help a small business to be net zero and to begin that climate journey, that actually provides them with a commercial opportunity to win tenders and be part of the supply chain of larger businesses. And I think there's a whole series of imaginative things we can do, both as the corporation, as a purchaser of services as well, but also working with the business community to encourage that sort of approach. And that can be about inclusion, it can be about sustainability, it can be about responsible business.
And it actually came up in your video, didn't it, with Harry Baden saying that businesses benefit from sustainability and that there's a profitability model around that, because young, talented workforce, they want to be working for socially sustainable and responsible companies. So I'll come to you, Elizabeth.
Great, thanks. I think there's a point here. I mean, innovation, sustainability, and inclusion, they're all, of course, the right things to do, right? I don't think anyone would dispute that. And they're also they make good business sense. And so I think the reason that came up time and time again in the conversations that we had with leaders across the board was because they recognized that for London and for the Square Mile to be truly leading and show the rest of the world how it's done, you need to get these pieces of the puzzle right. And they also feed into each other quite a lot. I mean, if you look at innovation and how you can really activate that. It's about getting collaboration in different parts of the business ecosystem together and interacting in a way that perhaps they wouldn't have before, right? This is about getting private sector and government and academia and all to kind of be speaking on the same wavelength and coming up with solutions together. And that also implies inclusion, right? Is that, the Square Mile is open to everyone, and it needs everyone to succeed. So I think there's a pretty interesting sort of interconnectedness between all of these points that we should also bear in mind.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Charlotte or Alex, did you have any thoughts on the sustainability or inclusion issue?
I'll chip in. I think what the pandemic has done is just raised the imperative of sustainability. It's kind of become more of it's become more clear how much of a global thing. So working in silos doesn't work. It needs to be kind of local solutions that have a global impact. And I think citizens, you see more and more demanding it, and ultimately where citizens demand things, then business and finance follows. And I think that action is kind of that groundswell is what we're seeing now, not just across kind of carbon reduction targets, but across social targets as well. Civil unrest and things like that are clear to see across the world. So I think the groundswell has built, and business and finance tends to follow that, and that's I think what we're seeing now.
Thanks, Alex. I'll come to you, Catherine. Unless Charlotte, did you want to say anything on that?
It was just really to echo what Alex was saying, and also just to reiterate that a lot of these things have been kind of being worked on for many years, but with the groundswell and with now the focus, it's great that there is a platform, and as Alex said, lots of people working in silos can now kind of come together, and the city can be that conduit to make sure that these things are being implemented in the right places at the right times.
Thanks. Catherine.
I just wanted to pick up on two elements, and one is on inclusion. And actually, although I could speak about a lot of the work that we're doing on inclusion in the workforce, I also just want to pick up on inclusion in the types of businesses we're trying to attract in. And I just wanted to flag that not only will we be transforming our business library into a small business research and enterprise centre to help high potential small businesses set up and thrive, but we also have our own property advisory team. So if you're wanting, as some people in the chat, in the questions have been asking, if you're wanting to look at how you can find an appropriate space for yourselves in the Square Mile, then please let us know. We do have advisors who can help. So that was one element, but the second one I wanted to touch on was on sustainability, and that was just to flag up again our ambitious climate action strategy, where we are absolutely determined to meet the targets we've set ourselves, seeing the city become carbon neutral by 2040. So that is going to take a lot of work, and it is going to require a lot of work with partners as well. Is it carbon neutral, or I'll get my terminology wrong? I'll get Giles to correct me in a second.
Changes every week. We say net zero.
I think it's net zero, not carbon neutral. That's a bad phrase these days.
Sustainability. I mean, everyone says something different, but yeah, we know what we mean. We're coming close to the end, but there is one other question I did want us to cover. We mentioned young people a little bit earlier on, but there's a question that's come through that I think is really interesting because it affects us as a business. I think it affects a lot of people. And the question is, working remotely has seen the person's disposable income increase, helping save for my future, to be able to spend money to enjoy recreation. Going back to full-time commuting will inevitably change that. What are your thoughts on this for the city's more junior workers? Inevitably, some of our younger city workers have been impacted pretty badly by the pandemic, and people have gotten used to this working from home, and some people have moved out and are buying houses slightly further outside. And I wonder if this is something that's been thought about as part of the report, or maybe Giles, if you want to say something, and anyone else if you've got a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll sort of keep my comments brief. I mean, yes, the pandemic sort of impacted people in very different ways, and we will all have seen it. And I have calls with colleagues who are further into their career, if I can put it that way, and they've got larger houses, and they've got a spare room which they can use as an office, and they're not having to commute every day, and life probably feels pretty good, maybe spending a bit more time with the family. But I've also, speaking to people in my team, and they were, for the first few weeks of the pandemic, probably sitting on the end of their bed with a laptop, and that's no use either. So I think it probably goes back to my comments earlier about how we'll use workspace. Businesses are going to have to work this out for themselves. But I think there's obviously much more impetus often from maybe younger people in the workforce for a return, because they don't have the space at home to work effectively. But there's actually also something about how do we make sure there isn't a sort of division within the workforce, that all the young people go back and all the older people stay, at home, because actually that's not going to achieve good outcomes for businesses either. That's not going to help with training. It's not going to help with sort of corporate culture. And I think most of the businesses we speak to are alive to that. And that's something which will sort of need to be addressed, because you can't have that sort of because generational divide means that some people go to the office and others don't. So I don't think any business would find that sustainable. And I think on the point about people have some people have acquired more savings and something. Again, I think that's often a bit of a generational divide, and that some people are in a different position to others on that. And I think whilst I think working patterns will evolve, they're probably not, they're not going to stay how they've been for the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Not from the conversations we've had.
Alex, you've got a good view on this with the CPA Next Gen group. I'll come to you next.
Yeah, definitely. I'll keep it really brief, but completely agree with Giles's point about generational differences. On top of that, I think what is really interesting is behavioural norms and social norms, and ultimately they've changed for good. And going with the default behaviour is always the safest thing to do in business and in work, and that's why ultimately working from home hasn't taken off until now. But those social norms have completely changed, and I think the challenge that businesses face is you've got to have meaningful connections and meaningful encounters in the office now that you can't have remotely. And I think that is going to be a challenge that every company has, because if you tell your young workforce you have to come to the office, then you're going to ultimately not attract the best talent. So creating meaningful encounters is just got to be a priority for businesses.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to come to Charlotte, Elizabeth, and then we're going to finish on final thoughts from Catherine. Charlotte.
Thanks, but yeah, just really quickly, I think it was more just kind of relating to my own personal experience of kind of growing up and learning and working, and to be in the mix when you're starting in a new career in a new environment with a new company. You learn by listening, by echoing or mirroring what your colleagues are doing, and I think that's something that has been lost with working from home. So I think there's a whole tranche of people. I mean, we at CBRE have taken on some new starters during the pandemic, and can't wait to get with them in an office environment and really help them understand the culture and the ways of the business. So I think that's something that people will miss out on, and hopefully will come back quickly.
Thanks, Charlotte. Elizabeth.
Great. Yeah, I think just to say that one of the strengths that the city really has, and the way it can attract young people starting out in their careers, is that value proposition that you will learn here, you will grow, and you will develop, and people will invest in your development. So just as Charlotte said, there has to be, and I think people starting out will come to the office for that reason, to get those mentorship opportunities. But that need needs to be clear, and businesses will have to articulate that to their staff.
Thank you. And then Catherine, final thoughts from you.
Well, my final thought, so first of all, just to be very clear, I do mean net zero, not carbon neutral by 2040, so we're being really ambitious. Very clear on that. But then I just want to say, yes, I mean, obviously there are pros and cons to remote working and the extra disposable income you get if you don't have to commute. There's a challenge in London, let's face it, about affordable housing for people. That is part of London, but and we need to address it. But what I really would say is that the city is a very exciting place to be. We're really looking forward to welcoming people back, and we're really confident about its future. And we want to work with partners, including everyone on this call, to make sure that we make the most of it. So thank you for listening to us today. Please be part of that journey as we move to the next chapter.
Great, thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you to all of our speakers. Just to finish then, a few things on the LA side. Currently at the City Centre, we're opening to the public again on Monday next week. Our first model talk will be next Friday, so come along at 12:30 if you want to come and join that. And we're also opening up our first residency at Cold Drops Yard, which will be open from around the 21st of June. So check our website out for news on that and our future events. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to our speakers. We are just now going to be doing a very short poll, so do stick around and answer that for us for some feedback, and have a great morning. See you all again very soon.